on NATO today with us. Peter,
thank you. Thank you very much, Milan. Also, dobré ráno, snad ešte ráno do Bratislavy. And also good morning here to Belgrade and our colleagues at the university. Well, Milan said that I will deliver a lecture. I would not call it lecture. I would just maybe provide a bit of info on NATO and what's going on, maybe a bit of history and a bit of the historical context of why NATO was established and what was the reason for it and why it serves its purpose. We at NATO always begin with words that I'll be brief, which means that I'll try to be brief and not to speak so long, but definitely today, as we have approximately 60 minutes, I will definitely not be brief. Well, I would like to start right away with a piece of history of NATO. As you know, it was founded in 1949 on 4th of April, and well, it's based on one of the basic principles of the UN Charter, which is, well, the Article 51, which is self-defense. And in NATO, it is embodied this principle, but in form of collective defense. So the states do not have to protect themselves or just to rely on self-defense, but they can rely on their partners and allies. But we have to look at, I would say, at that time situation in Europe, why the states decided to create NATO, because it was just right after the Second World War. It was like, well, almost 3 and 4 years after it, and the states, especially in the Western Europe and then in the Atlantic, were witnessing the rising power of at that time the Soviet Union that tried to get as much influence in its satellites in Eastern Europe and trying to reach for, let's say, Central Europe and somewhere more Germany as well. And the states were aware, were witnessing that the situation in this part of the world was not the same as in their own states, because what they witnessed during the Second World War was that people were dying, people were starving, and what they tried not to repeat was just this really cruel situations in this two world wars in 20th century. And they decided to build their own societies on basic democratic principles, like the principle of freedom, democracy, respect for human rights. And they had seen at that time that not always was the situation the case, and also in the eastern part of Europe. So they were a bit afraid of expanding the totalitarian regime also to this part of the world. So this was the main reason for NATO to being established, was that the states decided to defend their basic values, to defend their states, to defend their security, and the best way was to join their efforts and to create something what they later called NATO. So the basic, I would say, the very basic of NATO is a collective defense. And if we need to describe collective defense in very simple terms, then it is one for all and all for one, which means that if one or more member states of NATO are attacked, the others feel like they were attacked as well. And there is this obligation that if one of the NATO allies is attacked, then they will join their efforts and they will defend together. So this is the very cornerstone of NATO, the collective defense. But then it has also its second dimension, and the second dimension is, which is not so much known, but it's more and more dominant these days, and this is the so-called Article 4, which is mutual consultations. That the allies not only defend each other when the situation comes, but also they consult with each other if they think that there's a situation they want to consult or they need to consult. This, what we call maybe more political aspect of NATO, is what we call as a political aspect as just consultation. So it's not only about the military means that NATO has, but it's also about consultations that the allies can sit together and they can consult, and then maybe they can decide on on future steps. One of big discussions when the Washington Treaty was drafted was what would be the territory that NATO should defend, whether they should defend just their own states or whether it would be also something broader, and they decided to extend the North Atlantic area just south to Tropic of Cancer, and not to cover other parts of the world. But then later, and during the developments and the changing security environment, the common understanding became that NATO would decide, or when NATO feels that they need to intervene anywhere when it influences the security of member states, then they can. And this is the case for current operations, for example, in Afghanistan. So today, although the original idea was just to be limited to a Euro-Atlantic area, now NATO is a global organization when it comes to defending the security of the allies. As you know, the founding members were just 12. Today we have 28 members, and we came to this current state through 5 rounds of enlargement. There are also different forms of engagement or membership. You know that not every state has the same capabilities and capacities and resources. And we have, for example, Iceland, who does not have regular armed forces, but who hosts military bases and who takes part in the exercises. NATO exercises the air policing over Iceland as well. And then we have, for example, France, who in 1966 decided to withdraw from the military structures of NATO because France thought that they would like to counter the US strength in Europe and to be a sort of leader in Europe at that time. That's why they decided just to withdraw from the structures, and they were not part of any military decision-making in NATO till 2009 when they came back. So this is how NATO was established. And well, what I have not mentioned is that the founding treaty of NATO is the Washington Treaty, where all these principles are anchored. This treaty has not been changed over time. This treaty is something that and it shows that the idea behind NATO was very, I would say, very future-oriented and still can survive even the changing security environment, but not totally, because NATO then can decide, or in this changing environment, NATO decided to define its priorities, and how NATO does it is through its what we call strategic concepts. And strategic concepts are strategic documents that are outlining the main priorities, main tools, how to maintain the main tasks of NATO. So the main tasks, as I already mentioned, are to safeguard freedom and security by political and military means, and secure all the values based on peace. A peace approach to solving conflicts and crises. What is also very important is that NATO also serves to maintain and strengthen the transatlantic link. This is the organization that keeps the transatlantic link alive and that keeps it strong. When I speak about the main task, and I already mentioned the collective defense, just to mention that although NATO was established in 1949, first time that collective defense measures were invoked was in September, on 12th of September, just one day after the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, when NATO allies deployed their capabilities to take care and to monitor the airspace of the United States. So this is the first and only time when NATO decided to invoke Article 5 operation. And also to the procedure, I would say the obligation is not automatic. If there is a call for Article 5 operation, there's always a consultation between the allies, among the allies, and they decide whether NATO will act under Article 5. and whether all states will be involved in these operations. It's up to them. It's very individual. It's really based on individual contribution of each and every member state. But I would say, this support or this provision of assistance must be coordinated, and for this purpose serves the North Atlantic Council, which is the highest body at NATO, which takes all the decisions. The main principle of taking decisions at NATO at all levels is consensus. Consensus means that if we want to agree on something, we really need to have consent of all 28 states. If there's even one single state not agreeing to what we are going to agree, the decision is not taken. So the main procedure that we use at NATO and that NATO has been using from its very beginning is consultations, consultations, and consultations till we find a solution that is fine to everyone. And it sometimes really influences the everyday work of this alliance. When I spoke about the strategic concepts, I would like to mention maybe three main periods in NATO. The first one was during the Cold War, and the main task of NATO was just to defend its countries against the Eastern Bloc, if I may say it in this simple term. So all the strategic concepts were first classified, were secret, were not made public, and all of them were focused on developing the capabilities to strike if they feel they are endangered, or to use force to deter the possible threats coming from the Eastern Europe. This has changed when the Allies just found out that okay, they could use the maximum force possible, but once the nuclear weapons were developed and once they were part of the strategic planning of alliance, they found out that it might be quite dangerous for the entire world population if they got engaged in a total war fighting with nuclear weapons. And they found out, especially during the Cuban crisis and other crises during the Cold War, that there might be also lower scale conflicts, and that not the total force should be used, but maybe more conventional armed forces would find place in this concept. And so they also decided to start consultations with the Eastern Bloc and maybe try to find a sort of cooperation. But I would say this first period was mostly characterized by concepts of a total strike, total retaliation, and developing the capacities and capabilities to defend NATO countries. The second period came just right after the end of the Cold War. The situation was totally changed because NATO lost its main enemy, if I may call it so, and the new relationships started to be built with the former Eastern Bloc countries, but also with Russia. And NATO needed to find a modus vivendi, how to cope with this new situation, because it was no more just let's say planning to attack, but also planning to cooperate, and how to cooperate, how to engage the other, I would say, the other side. And they started to think also about possible enlargement and possible development of partnerships beyond NATO, because at that time NATO had just its members and nothing else. There was not much cooperation, because every cooperation that was developed during the Cold War was perceived by the other side as a gaining more power and more influence in some parts of the world. So it was always viewed through the confrontation, and that was not the case after the Cold War was over. And also this is this is the qualitative change for NATO to find its strategic concepts a new place. And what was also and I would say formal change was that the strategic concepts, which were two at that time in 1991 and 1999, was that they were not classified anymore. They were made public. Everyone could read them. Everyone could understand what NATO intended to do for the coming years. And the main, I would say, backbones were, except for the Article 5, of course, was cooperation, developing new partnerships, and also tackling new problems like terrorism or environmental changes, etc. And with that, the situation changed, and this is the third period, and I would say the strategic environment of NATO, and the period came after the terrorist attacks in the United States on 11th of September, when all the allies and other states realized that the conventional threats are not the only threats or not the major threats that NATO should and could face. That's why with this they try to develop new approaches to security. They try to develop new structures of NATO. They try to reform NATO just to be able to reflect on this new development. And with that, we came to a new strategic concept, which was adopted in 2010 in Lisbon at the summit. And it has, I would say, three pillars, and they're quite, I would say, quite distinctive and clear. The first one remains always the same as it had been before, and that's this Article 5, collective defense. What is new is that collective defense is not only a tool to be used to defend the NATO members, allies, against the conventional threats, but also to emerging threats like cyber defense. As you may remember, Estonia was facing one of its biggest attacks on its infrastructure through cyber attacks, and so the Article 5 was a bit extended also to emerging threats, and the decision that NATO could use Article 5 also for this type of attacks or insecurities. The second main pillar is crisis management. Crisis management, which we can translate simply in operations, but not only operations, but also the time before the crisis, before the crisis, then during the crisis, which is obviously the operation, and then after the crisis or after the conflict, which is the post-conflict reconstruction and rebuilding. And NATO decided to adopt a comprehensive strategy towards this. What is new also when we speak about the new era in NATO's security environment when compared to Cold War is that NATO started to use its armed forces to be engaged in operations other than Article 5 operations. They could engage anywhere in the world when they thought this would be a threat to the security of alliance or one of its members or more. So this is the second pillar of the new strategic concept, the crisis management. The third one, which is quite new, at least in its complexity, it's what we call cooperative security. Cooperative security means working with other actors, other partners outside NATO. And it's obviously two types. The first one are the states outside NATO. Being it states in the Euro-Atlantic area who are not the NATO members or states anywhere in the world. And the second type of actors are international organizations. When we talk about international organizations, obviously I would say the obvious suspects are the UN, OSCE, the European Union, of course, but also organizations like African Union or League of Arab States. And this strategic concept, we had a few more elements that I would not elaborate more on, but just maybe to name them, and those are the emerging threats. One of the main decisions which changed the structure of NATO was to create a separate division dealing with emerging security threats, being it cyber defense, energy security, environmental security. So this is now an integral part of NATO's business as well. And then we have all this, I would say, old but in a new form threats, and those are like proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, or defense against missiles targeting NATO allies. I would maybe just jump to this crisis management and namely operations. As I already said, these operations have its history. It's not a long history since the first engagement of NATO, if we speak about the new era, was in 1995 in the Western Balkans. Um, it was the Operation I4, which had 60,000 troops deployed to the ground, and then succeeded by S4. Then we have Operation in Macedonia, and then also Operations Althea in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2004. So as you can see, the NATO's first engagement in real operations was in Western Balkans, and it's I would say it's very natural because Western Balkans being an integral part of European security and being an integral part of transatlantic area, so it's quite understandable, and we understood the complex situation here in Western Balkans, and we can say now that the NATO engagement in Western Balkans was a success. Although the business has not been finished, we can say it's on a good track, and this is also one of the fruits of NATO's engagement after and post Cold War era. Maybe coming to current operations, starting with not the biggest one, but something that is very close to this region, and that's the KFOR, which has been established in 1999 in June, with quite clear mandate that has remained till today. And there are two main tasks. The first one is providing for safe and secure environment. And the second task is to provide for freedom of movement for the people living in Kosovo. KFOR has been viewed so far, when we compare it with other organizations, being it UN or the European Union, as one of the most trusted by all parties, because we have other actors which are maybe more trusted by one of the parties but not trusted by the other one. So KFOR has been quite stable, and thus I'm trying to keep its impartial stance when being in Kosovo. The recent development, the agreement reached between Belgrade and Pristina had also influence on NATO and KFOR in particular, since the sides asked NATO to be involved as a sort of security guarantor for this agreement, especially in a forum that KFOR would remain in Kosovo for a few coming years. That also providing a guarantee, and this was also accepted by Pristina, that no Kosovo security forces can be deployed in northern part of Kosovo without the prior consent of the commander of KFOR. So with this, KFOR tried to, let's say, stay away from the EU business, but then it became an integral part of this agreement. And if we may speculate about the future and the questions that are always posed to us, whether KFOR will withdraw from Kosovo in coming months, we can say that this agreement does not automatically mean that Kosovo would withdraw from Kosovo. Well, KFOR will withdraw from Kosovo. There are maybe some perspectives and prospects for reducing the numbers, but this will also be made based on conditions on the ground, how this agreement will be implemented, and how the situation would look like in a few months. So what we can say that if we start to evaluate the situation and review it, we think that at least 6 months will take just to go through all the implementation phases and how to evaluate it, and then we can discuss whether KFOR should stay there in its present form or just maybe reduce its numbers. That's the KFOR, and maybe if you have them more specific questions, please don't ask them. Well, probably what we have not mentioned.
Don't hesitate to ask them.
Yeah, don't hesitate to ask them. And what we probably have forgotten to mention at the beginning of this presentation, and we're almost in half of it, maybe further, that you can pose any question anytime, so you can interrupt me anytime, but not been the case so far. But please feel free to interrupt me and ask the questions. Then you would save maybe some of my voice, not to go through all the points that I have, and maybe to answer some of them. Continuing with the operations, the biggest operational priority, the biggest operation so far of NATO, the biggest engagement, I would say the most tricky, most complicated, most complex operation is the operation in Afghanistan, ISAF. That ISAF was originally established in 2001 under the auspices or with the UN mandate, and then in 2003 was taken over by NATO, that established its command structures and just ended the period when the command structures were rotated, if I'm not mistaken, on 6 months time. NATO's first role was just to secure the capital and its surroundings, and then in the coming years from 2003 to 2006, it just spread across the whole of the country. Now it's active, I would say, everywhere in Afghanistan. And now we're in the phase where we have a bit less than 100,000 troops on the ground with 50 troop contributors. So it's not only 28 NATO member states, but another 22 operational contributors to this operation. So this is also another distinctive fact about this operation, that NATO is not the only actor there, or at least not only the allies are those who are contributing to this operation. And we have some states, for example, Georgia, that are contributing more than 2,000 or more than 1,500 troops, which is much more than many of the allies contributing to this operation. The main tasks of ISAF in Afghanistan is first to protect people, second to fight the terrorists and to try to eradicate the safe havens of them, and then to help with the development and governance of the government, of course, and fourth, try assist in building the Afghan national security forces. And now we have few challenges ahead, as you probably may have heard. NATO at the Chicago summit in 2012, it was last year, yeah, it's 2012, decided to end its operation by the end of 2014. So there will be no troops, no ISAF troops on the ground in Afghanistan at the beginning of January 2015. With this decision, there are connected many complex issues and many open questions, because the second part of this decision was that there will be a new mission of NATO after 2014, which will be much smaller. And if we talk about much smaller mission, it means that it might be something like 10% of the current strength. So it might be something between 8,000 to 12,000 troops. This mission must be strictly non-combat mission, which means that no military activities, no fighting activities will be conducted by this mission. And the main mission or the main task of this mission will be to train, advise, and assist the ANSF. There's another element which was not part of the Chicago decision, that the United States, based on their bilateral agreements, will contribute other forces and helping stabilize Afghanistan also through their special forces. So also doing some combat activities, but this is out of the NATO scope. Other challenges that we have with regard to Afghanistan is when I said that we must finish this mission by the end of 2014, it means that you have to withdraw more than 80,000 troops, which by itself is a real task, and planning just for a new operation, how to withdraw the troops and how not to endanger the people in Afghanistan, how not to endanger the remaining troops till the end of 2014. After 2014, the international community and NATO being part of it also decided to financially contribute to building ANSF, this Afghan National Security Forces, which means that for the next decade after 2014, we will be financially contributing to building these forces. The current strength of Afghan National Security Forces is more than 300,000. The end state is planned for 220,000 troops on the ground. So this is another task: how to first find the resources for them, and then how to streamline these resources to be used in a very transparent manner, and how to make the best use of the money that we are donating to Afghanistan. Well, I think that would be it for Afghanistan, and then we have just, I would say, very just to name them, we have other operations that are active, and those are two. The first one is Active Endeavor. That's an operation that was established just after the terrorist attacks in the United States in 2001. The main task of this operation is to monitor the Mediterranean Sea for possible terrorist activities. The other one is called Ocean Shield, and it is an anti-piracy or piracy operation of the Horn of Africa. So those are the operations that we have right now, and we are also providing some assistance to African Union, mostly in the form of airlift for the troops when they need to be deployed anywhere in Africa. So those were the, I would say, the second pillar of NATO strategy and concept. The third one is partnership policy, or the cooperative security, as we call it. We decided that NATO can live just, well, or can rely just on its member states. This 28 member states, well, the Article 5 is obviously the main task, but if NATO wants to keep its relevancy, well, in facing the current security challenges, it can't do it just on its own. That's why NATO decided to develop new partnerships to better cooperate with other actors than the allies. And we have quite a few tools for doing this, and that's it. That's a special formats for talking with partners, and then also a special, I would say, relationships with some of the partners. And I would say who we call the strategic partner of NATO is Russia. We decided to establish Russia as a strategic partner in 1997. When we concluded or signed what we call the Founding Act. And then NATO-Russia Council in 2002 was created. It is a forum which is a bit different from the other allies, because usually, or other partners, usually when we speak about partners, we speak about 28 plus N being a number of partners, usually 28 plus 1. In this case, we don't speak about 28 plus Russia at the NATO-Russia Council, but we speak about 29 allies partners. So that's the difference. What we do right now with Russia, we have some cooperation that has already brought its fruits. We have very good cooperation in Afghanistan, mostly in training the helicopter personnel and in maintaining the helicopters of the Afghan National Security Forces. Russia is also very much interested in fighting terrorism. We have a common project called Standex. It is a project on detection of explosives, well, in crowds, for example, in metro, or well, what happened at the airport in Russia as well. So this is one of the common projects that we have. But we have also some of the open questions where we really can disagree, and we disagree. I would say the most discussed one is missile defense project, where we have two different approaches. NATO is always and has been always saying that we'd like to have two different systems and trying to cooperate with each other. And Russia is insisting on having one, for Russia being a part of this system. Unfortunately, this project influences many other projects that we have with Russia, because Russia sometimes is not willing to cooperate more, just because we can't do any progress in missile defense. If we talk about Russia, what will be crucial for the cooperation for the future is their cooperation in Afghanistan. As you know, we'll probably need a new UN Security Council resolution for the new mission. At least some allies are asking for it, and also some states outside NATO. Russia is at the time quite hesitant to let's say, to give its final approval for the new resolution. So we'll need to work more with Russia, and we'll see what it brings. Then we have another partnership with Ukraine. Ukraine was one of the very prospective states for, I would say, intensifying the cooperation. Unfortunately, the politics in Ukraine turned out in a way that Ukraine decided for a non-bloc status, and currently the cooperation is not that active as we had been used to before. But still, we have a very fruitful dialogue in the military field, and we can say that the reforms that are taking place in Ukraine are very fruitful, and also thanks to the cooperation with NATO, and also the Ukrainian side appreciates this cooperation. And political part of these consultations, we have some limits, but as I said, based mostly on the political situation in Ukraine. We have other formats. We have Georgia, NATO-Georgia Commission, which is maybe in a different shape, because Georgia is in a situation where it really aspires for NATO membership. It has not been prepared yet. It still has a lot to do, but the activities that are coming from Georgia towards NATO are very active, and being the biggest or the largest troop contributor to our operations outside NATO. Then we also see a real value of this partnership. Okay. So we have now, I would just maybe like to talk more on NATO-Serbia cooperation. Serbia is not, I would say, and well, quite naturally, one of the most active partners in terms that it would be integrated into NATO partnership programs. And so, of course, due to history, it's also about the decisions that Serbia has adopted in terms of being able and willing to cooperate with NATO. Because when I talk about partnerships, when I talk about the relationships with other countries and NATO, it's always on the partner country, how active, how intense the cooperation will be. This cooperation is always based on the activities that the state who's willing and who's keen on cooperating with NATO brings to the table. What we have currently on the table from Serbia is what we call IPAP, that's the Individual Partnership Action Plan. This is a program where, let's say, formal document that once agreed, it is signed by NATO and Serbia in this case, and it just outlines the areas where we can cooperate more. Serbia has been part of Partnership for Peace since 2006. It has been active mostly in defense reforms, and what I know from my military colleagues, the Serbian Ministry of Defense and the officers from the General Staff are very satisfied with the cooperation, especially it brings some fruits also to the reforms. But the political cooperation is something that is more sensitive. And that's why we've been waiting for Serbia for its decisions to be more active or to decide to develop the cooperation further. We have a good news that after months of waiting, Serbia has submitted its IPAP text to NATO last week on Friday, which means that now it will go through discussions of allies. And once this document is finished, it means that we can start implementing new projects. And when I talk about new projects, it means that Serbia can benefit of this cooperation. We have different trust funds, we have different programs, we have different, I would say, financial schemes, how to develop projects for, I don't know, for example, for disposal of surplus ammunition, or how to integrate the former members of the armed forces into the society, how to do some grants for the NGOs to develop these programs. So now it's up to, once this program is finished, it's up to Serbia and up to NATO where and to what extent we agree on the cooperation. And everyone who's familiar with these programs well, is always talking about Serbia and NATO, that this has been a major upgrade of the cooperation between NATO and Serbia since 1999. And when I'm here in the region, I would maybe, well, I've got two more topics. How much time do we have? 10 minutes?
Still have time, yeah.
Okay. Open door policy. That's something that also found its place on Earth after the end of the Cold War, because when NATO saw that we do not have the two blocks anymore, it started to think about maybe integrating other states from the Eastern Bloc to NATO, because as you know, the general idea of having Europe all free and at peace, it also means that the whole Europe will be integrated in one organization, maybe two, but definitely in one space. And this, I would say, this organization must share the same values. So when NATO saw this opportunity to enlarge, to broaden I would say, the scope of or the area of democracy and freedom and peace, they naturally looked at Eastern Europe. They created the Partnership for Peace program, which was a program how to formally develop the relations with the states from Eastern Europe, and also it tried to define the criteria for becoming a member. I mean, criteria for the states when they decided or when they wanted to become a member. This is Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, and it also says that NATO can enlarge, or NATO can integrate other states when they share the same values and when they fulfill the criteria. To be frank, the criteria have not been fully specified, and it's always more political decision than a very technical one. And most of it, I mean, beside the defense reforms and beside the economic reforms, it's all about also about the values and the state of democracy, rule of law. Maybe just one example from my own country. We had 3 states that were invited to become NATO members in 1999, and those were 3 of 4 Visegrad countries in our region. Those were Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary, and Slovakia was not part of it. And it was not part of it not because we were economically weaker or we were doing worse, and I don't know, in our economic figures or the reforms in our country, but also it was mostly due to the rule of law at that time and the state of democracy at the time. And the Allies just decided that with the regime that we had at the time, they could not agree to have this regime or to have the establishment being part of NATO when they were not sure that they were sharing the same values. So although we were part of the package, we were trying to get into NATO within our V4, Visegrad 4 organization. We were not part of it. I would like to go through a few of the countries here in the region, just very briefly. Obviously, Macedonia fulfilled all the criteria for becoming a member, except for one. It still has its bilateral issue with Greece on the official name of the country. Otherwise, everything has been fulfilled. But till this issue is not solved, Macedonia cannot become a member of NATO. Now it has already finished its 13 annual cycles of evaluation whether they fulfill all the criteria for becoming a NATO member, and this is the only one. And you can imagine a state coming 13 years through the same process and still getting the same answer, especially in the last few years. Then we have Montenegro, which we now call informally the frontrunner of enlargement process. It has finished only its 3 annual cycles of this evaluation, but they've performed and delivered in their reforms, and the progress that has been achieved has been appreciated by the allies. What is still not finished, and this is also well, one of the supportive arguments for having also the democratic structures and reforms in place, is the rule of law and the public support for NATO membership. As public support for NATO membership is one of the criteria that NATO looks at when it decides on admitting and integrating a new member. And then we have Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's a qualitatively different level, since these first two countries are in a program what we call Membership Action Plan. It is a program in which all the criteria are being defined. I mean, mostly technically, and this is the framework in which the evaluation process is being done. Bosnia and Herzegovina has not been invited to this program, since there is one clear condition, and it is the registration of immovable defense property. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, they have adopted the political decisions, but unfortunately, the implementation has not been made so far. So it stands still behind the door, and that's the same with Georgia. That is not part of this program, and but as I mentioned before, very keen on being a member of NATO very soon. And now, well, this were the political aspects. But when we talk about NATO and when we talk about defense, we have always one I would say particular issue, and that's money. It's always about money. Everything's about money, and especially in time of financial austerity and the budget cuts in all the member states and elsewhere. We are getting more and more questions, especially from the candidates, whether it is not more costly or whether it is costly to be in NATO, or whether we can save some money just entering the alliance, or whether being a NATO member can help the economy, can help the investments. And to answer all these questions, we can say that, well, very simply, being a NATO member is not a cheap solution for a state. It costs some money. You have to contribute to the overall budget. You have to develop your own capabilities to be able to contribute to NATO as such. You need to contribute to operations, and you need to pay your checks as well, and to pay your debt sometimes. But it is costly, but it's not that costly as if you had to pay for your own armed forces, being able to fulfill the whole spectrum of the tasks that usually the armed forces have to do. So, well, in case of Slovakia, and this is not only case of Slovakia, but all the member states, as maybe except for the United States and maybe some of the major and big NATO members, is that we decided to keep some of the capabilities we had, but we decided to do some radical cuts in our armed forces, because we just thought that, well, okay, we got the guarantees from NATO that we did not need them anymore, because the allies, in case we needed them, would provide them. Which means that we had reduced the number of our armed forces from, I think, it was over 60,000 to a current number which is something more than 16,000. With this, you can save a lot of money, at least for funding the people being in service every day, and funding the facilities that you have. And then now we can develop more professional and more advanced armed forces, maybe for less money than we otherwise had to spend on if not being in NATO. But this is the purely, I would say, budgetary and military point of view. But being a NATO member, and well, of course, EU member as well, means that you first had to do some reforms, which means that you reformed your state, you reformed your economic structure, your political structure, your rule of law structures and everything else. And then it also means that when you fulfill the criteria and being in NATO, that you have some security guarantees that if something happens, you're not on your own. And this, in many ways, attracts investments. Because if you look at many other countries in the world, being in Africa or Asia, there will be many foreign companies investing in the states, but you never have enough security for your investment, that your investment would not go in vain, because you don't have the security guarantees from the state, because the state sometimes cannot give you the security guarantees because they are not sure whether they would be able to provide for their own security. So combining, I would say, the political aspects with the military aspects and the security aspects, it definitely attracts in the country. This was the case for Slovakia, because if you look at our figures, well, before 1998 and after that, there were two main factors why we had a big GDP growth, which was in some years almost 10% per year. And this was due to the reforms that we had to do. But also this was due to the fact that we became members of these two I would say, very exclusive clubs, and it was the European Union and NATO. And we really could feel that in our economy, but also in everyday life. Not talking about the programs of NATO, that NATO, for example, in Slovakia, invested in rebuilding one of our airfields in the central part of Slovakia, when they invested more than 30 millions of euros, and not talking about other projects that are done through different agencies, and they are investing in Slovakia or supporting our scientific programs or academic programs, or we have quite a portion of money coming from NATO to our NGO, non-governmental organizations, supporting the ideas of security and security policy. Just maybe to conclude, when talking about NATO and when talking about this region, Serbia and the Western Balkans in general, when I said that the idea of having Europe whole, free, and at peace, we could not imagine that this would not be a case for the whole of Europe. And if you look at the map, what states are integrated in the European Union, what states are integrated in NATO, then I would say the part of this region is probably the only one where we have most white places, blank places. And well, if you look at the neighborhood, we already have Croatia and Bulgaria and Albania in NATO. We have Romania and Bulgaria in the European Union. We have some prospective candidates in Montenegro. And looking at the map, why we wanted and why we want and why we will want to invest in Serbia to deepen its cooperation with NATO and also with the European Union is because there would be just Serbia on the map that would not be integrated or not developing the cooperation with these organizations and also with the countries in the region, which would be a pity, since we think that based on the Serbian history, based on the state, on your geographical position, and on your capabilities, we can't imagine that this region could be stable and prosperous without having Serbia and the structures. It's not about forcing Serbia to become a member of one of these organizations, since this is always the responsibility of the state to be active and to come to this organization and to ask for membership and to fulfill the criteria. But we also understand that by doing this, all the states that are applying for membership in either of these organizations can get much more than they would normally have without being there, and standing just on their own here in the region is not imaginable for us, because we don't think this is the feasible option. And with this, I would like to conclude this not short and definitely not brief briefing on what's going on in NATO and maybe in broader terms in this region. By this, I'd like to thank you for your patience and giving back the floor to Milan.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing your remarks with us. It was also almost like a testimony before a parliamentary committee. With that, I'd like to open the floor for questions. We'd like to continue with our debate soon afterwards, so I'll have two questions. Of course, Peter is from Slovakia, so I think that we should give the floor first to the audience here in Belgrade to ask him a question, and then we will pass the floor to Bratislava. So Belgrade has a chance to ask the first question, and before they do so, I have an announcement for Bratislava. Today we have quite a strong competition in the match between Slovakia and the United States. And the latest update that I'm receiving while we are talking is that Slovakia is leading 3-0.
Whoa!
So that's
3-1.
That also deserves a round of applause. But let's get on with our questions, and I turn now to the audience in Belgrade whether they have a question to our lecturer. Anybody wants to ask anything? Yes, over there.
Over there?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, just ask a question.
Okay. My name is Marta. I'm also from Slovakia, but currently I'm here at the Faculty of Political Science, and actually, so is my alma mater because I graduated a couple of years.
Use microphone.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Microphone. Okay. You can go over here.
Somebody else wants to ask a question? Is there somebody else who wants to ask a question?
Okay. Hello. My name is Samuel Arbe. I'm a student here at the Faculty of Political Science in Belgrade, and I'm also a graduate of Faculty of Social and Economic Science in Bratislava a couple of years ago. First of all, thank you, Peter, for giving us a very comprehensive and very complex lecture. You mentioned most of the points. I had like 5 questions, and one by one, you answered all of them. So I will just come to one final question, and it is, after the Cold War, NATO came into the period when it starts to redefine its mission. No one was sure whether NATO is still justifiable as an organization when there is not a counterpart on the other side. There was no Soviet Union, there was no clear enemy of the NATO as it was during the Cold War. Later on in 9/11 has proved that there is still a need for defense organization. I'd like to ask you whether you think that where is the focus of NATO today? I mean, like you mentioned the three lines. There are strategic documents NATO is mentioning. Is NATO becoming more counter-terrorist organization? Was 9/11 the impetus for giving or momentum for giving the NATO the reason to cooperate and to function more? And the question is, does NATO have capabilities to fight this asymmetric war? Because there is no clear enemy on the other side. Thank you.
Can we get more questions and I can answer at once, or just question by question?
Let's go to the question from Bratislava. Is there somebody who wants to ask a question?
Dobar dan to Serbia. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Bator, let me virtually welcome you here in Bratislava. And I would like to pose a question regarding to intern cooperation in NATO, and that it is a possibility for Serbia to participate in NATO smart defense or sharing and pooling policies without full membership for Serbia. Thank you.
The question was whether Serbia can participate in NATO's smart defense program without being a member of the alliance.
Yes.
Peter, go ahead.
Okay, so the first question was, what's the strategic focus on NATO right now, and whether we have capabilities for this asymmetric threat? So, well, as someone already said, yeah, NATO had to redefine its role, since it did not have the enemy, the clear enemy, being at Eastern Bloc and being at Russia in the forefront. Yeah, NATO redefined it because although it did not have to defend itself and the allies against Russia and its satellites, it also found out that the main threat does not come from Russia anymore. It does not come from the Eastern Europe anymore, but it comes from somewhere else. And so I would say a very natural shift of NATO from the collective defense stemming out from the threat from Russia to just collective defense and defense of its allies from the threats coming from elsewhere. And when we talk about these threats, those are, well, the missile defense or the proliferation of missiles, mostly talking about North Korea or Iran, then the terrorism, which is really not easy to tackle from the NATO perspective, and also, well, the proliferation of other weapons, being it chemical or radiological. And then also NATO defined other threats that are coming from from elsewhere and not from Europe. But those are this cyber defense, as I mentioned. One of the threats that NATO is definitely not prepared to, I would say, to be fully protected against them, or being it energy security in terms when you have the energy supplies disruptions, then it can have very serious influence on the capacities and capabilities of every single state to, let's say, to keep your armed forces prepared to face the challenges, but also these disruptions can pretty much destroy your economy, as we witnessed on personally on our skins what happened in Slovakia when we had some gas problems or with the gas coming from Russia through Ukraine. So yes, the strategic focus now, as NATO is still defending its allies against threats coming from elsewhere, and it tries to develop the capabilities. It is not easy. We have to for new ways how to develop these capabilities. It is also a question of sharing the experience of the single allies, and how to find the ways how to, let's say, merge the interests and the activities of the NATO member states, and how to bring these activities also to NATO, because there are two different things. The first one is to have your capabilities at home, and then the second one to make these capabilities available to NATO as such, and to be interoperable with the other allies. Serbia and the smart defense projects. That is a question. Usually, when we talk about smart defense projects, is about building the capabilities of NATO through, let's say, combining our resources, our knowledge, and our capabilities to make them better, and to make better use of this money that we have. Because smart defense does not mean just to save money, but to make the best of the money. It's usually done just among the allies, because there is a whole process of defense planning, and usually this defense planning is about the capabilities that the member states are providing or are creating for NATO and at NATO. But we have few projects and we have few capabilities of states where the NATO members are cooperating with other states outside NATO. One of the examples, United States, but also Slovakia and many other states are cooperating very closely with Israel, for example, in the field of information technologies and field of protection of information and all this high tech. So what we can do is that Serbia might be a part of some of these projects with one or more of the allies, and once this project is finished with the allies and with Serbia, then it is submitted to NATO, to the system of the defense planning. But talking about the real smart defense project in Serbia, it's not that easy. Well, my simple answer would be rather no than yes. But what maybe would be the first step that leads to this is, and this is something that we have been discussing at NATO and also with Serbia, and it is one of the brave thoughts that we have with regard to Serbia, is that one day Serbia might contribute their forces to our operations, as many other partners are doing, without being members, without the obligation to once become a member of NATO, but they can provide troops for our operations. And I know that Serbia is very good at providing the military doctors for the operations. I know that they've done lots and training and preparing these people to be sent to operations, probably at the first stage to the UN operations. But we see no obstacles to provide them also for NATO operations. So maybe the first step would not be to participate in smart defense projects, but to participate in our operations, which would be a significant upgrade of the cooperation we have between NATO and Serbia.
Wonderful. We are now at 12:51. I'd like to make a recess for less than 10 minutes, so we will come back at 1 o'clock sharp to continue with the debate of our teams. We are saying hello to Bratislava, thanking the audiences both here in Belgrade and in Bratislava for their attention. And of course, once again, we thank Chief Political Advisor to Slovakia's Permanent Representative to NATO, Peter Bator, for his remarks from today. So thank you very much, and we will reconvene in less than 9 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon from Belgrade to Bratislava. My name is Milan Ježovica, and I'm with MESA 10, a Bratislava-based think tank. We are launching today debates between the University of Belgrade and Comenius University in Bratislava. The aim of our project, which we are initiating today, is to promote democratic values, encourage critical thinking, and of course to strengthen the debate skills of university students. We are also hoping that there will be more contacts between the students here from Belgrade and from Bratislava, and more joint projects, especially in security area. Today we are debating NATO. This is of course a sensitive topic. We are sitting here in Belgrade, 5 hours car drive from Bratislava, but we are divided. Slovakia is a member of the European Union and is a member of the alliance. Serbia is not yet a member of the European Union, and it's not a member of the alliance, even though it is a partner of the alliance. But we from Slovakia believe that the European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Europe will not be completed without the Western Balkans, and of course that counts Serbia included. Of course, the choices that a country makes are only dependent upon the country, so it's up on Serbia to decide which way it wants to join. But we are not here to tell her which way to go, but we are here today to listen to the arguments of 2 students' teams from Belgrade and from Bratislava. I'd like to welcome them to the floor, welcome their tutors, Zuzana Hozlarova in Bratislava and Filip Eidus here in Belgrade. I'd like to thank them for working with the teams, for preparing them for the debates. And before launching the debate, I also like to thank National Endowment for Democracy, which supported our project, and I'd like to appreciate the role of 2 Slovak companies, Logical and Gosu, which are making today's broadcast between Belgrade and Bratislava possible. I will be the moderator of the debate. We will try to cover 6 questions. I'll ask the question. Each team will have 2 minutes to answer the question. We will begin with a question here from Belgrade, and Bratislava will be answering that question first. Then Belgrade will answer the question, and then we will have the audiences asking the question. First question from the audience will be put from Bratislava, and Belgrade will answer that question. It will have 2 minutes for answering that question, and then Bratislava will answer with 2 minutes of time. We are, of course, imposing the time limits because we want to have a tight debate, and we also want to see how quickly the debaters can make an argument. With that, I'll go immediately right into the lion's pit. And of course, we will begin with the first question. And that is, we have heard a lecture about NATO. Of course, we can talk about the North Atlantic Alliance for much longer than we have devoted the space to it. But the very fundamental question for the two-student team is, what is NATO to you? What does it mean to you? So here we go, Bratislava. The time is yours and the floor is yours. You can answer the question. What is NATO to you?
Thank you for the question. My name is Silvia Kotorova and I'm a student of University, Comenius University in Bratislava, Faculty of Social and Economic Sciences. I would like to answer this question from the viewpoint of being a Slovak citizen. First of all, I would like to mention the fact that in 1998, our requests for membership in NATO were rejected because of the lack of democracy we suffered from. Slovakia as a country were able to manage the situation to become a full member. Slovakia perceives NATO as a security provider, and becoming a part of NATO in 2004 was a significant moment for Slovakia for several reasons. Slovakia is a small post-communist country, and it's not able to spend a huge amount of state budget for self-defense. And also becoming a part of a military organization was one of the main goal that Slovakia wanted to achieve because of the Article 5 that says that an attack against one or several members is considered as an attack against all. It means that if Slovakia would be attacked by any country, that NATO can provide a security or provide a defense. NATO as a partner promotes democracy, promotes peace, and these values are very important for Slovakia as such, because we had experience with the lack of democracy. So NATO is for us as Slovaks important political and military organization.
Thank you very much. Your 2 minutes are up. Now it's up on the Belgrade team to answer the question.
Thank you very much. My name is Jana Mišić, and I'm a second-year student here at the Faculty of Political Science, studying international relations as my major. On the topic of the NATO, which is certainly a hot topic and has been for some while here in Serbia, opinions are usually divided. I would like to approach this subject firstly from a standpoint of typical Serbian, let's say, and then my personal standpoint. Well, here sometimes people would consider NATO someone as who looks upon all of us and decides accordingly to its own interests. But the reality would be that people are not very familiar with actually the key terms and points of the NATO. So therefore, my opinion as someone who studies international relations would be a much deeper comprehension of what NATO really is. So what NATO represents to me and to also a huge number of people here, which could eventually determine our future relations with the NATO, would be that it is an organization of extreme value and one of the current and of course future leaders of in the world. So as an organization that covers such important topics in terms with not only terrorism and cyber attacks, but also something that really has an impact also here on us after the history that we've had. NATO is a crucial factor that will not be neglected. So my personal opinion is that it is a much needed organization, that it is an important one, that it is one that will definitely help and strive towards those values that we all strive for, which are individual liberty, human rights, rule of law, etc. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being so disciplined. Now we are going back to Bratislava. Audience in Bratislava can ask a question. Would anybody in the audience in Bratislava want to ask a question to the Belgrade team and to the Bratislava team?
Nobody in this moment.
Nobody? No questions? Okay, here in Belgrade, we have a question. Would you come to the microphone? In the meantime, don't overstep the opportunity to ask the question, Bratislava.
We have the one question here.
You? Okay.
Well, asking, I'd like to know how Belgrade students look upon the possibility of becoming.
We cannot hear you.
I'd like to know how EU students look at the possibilities of becoming an EU state, and how they look if their population is prepared to live according to EU laws.
Did you understand the question?
I think it was something regarding how the students here look at the EU possible future membership or something.
Did the question concern the possible European Union membership?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
And now let's go with the question.
Okay. You have mentioned that the people in Serbia are not familiar enough with the concept of NATO itself. So I'm interested in who has a responsibility to make sure that people of Serbia, citizens of Serbia, find out a bit more about NATO, and is that responsibility of Serbia as a country, or maybe should NATO take interest in spreading the word about NATO? Thank you.
Did Bratislava understand the question?
Yes.
Wonderful. So we go ahead now with Belgrade answering the question, and Bratislava will answer the question.
Okay. Well, regarding the first question, if I understood correctly, it was of how students here view our possible future EU membership. Well, not only students, but the whole country has fairly divided opinions. Before even the polls and referendum stated that the majority of the country was for EU membership. However, lately, with developments and with the latest developments, the polls have stated that the majority of people here in Serbia are not for the EU membership. Here at and they have degraded as the support has degraded as much as 20% of the referendum that would accept NATO, and therefore, okay, people are not as for the EU as they were. Here, students at the Faculty of Political Science are also very divided, so we'll see what happens next.
Wonderful. Bratislava, go ahead.
So I think it's important also for Serbia to become a part of NATO, not just for NATO to gain another country, because as Serbia, I think it's also a small country that cannot afford that huge amount of money to provide security for its citizens, for self-defense, and NATO are able to do it. So I think it's important for Serbia to become a part, to start to think that it can become a part of NATO as a partner and later as a full member. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Now we go for the second question, and that is very, very simple. When NATO was being enlarged before 1999, NATO Enlargement Ratification Office at the State Department coined a phrase that NATO is a community of shared values. And my question is, what do you think are the values that NATO is based on? And what are these shared values? Are they close to you? Are they not close to you? Now we go first to Belgrade and then we go to Bratislava, which will answer the question. So Belgrade has the floor now.
Thank you and greetings to Slovakia and Bratislava. I'm Dušan Jovčić. I'm on the second year of on the Faculty of Political Science. My major is international relations. So about the question, when you think, debate, and speak about NATO or any other organization, we should observe its work through principles that are behind the work of the organizations. So let's simply look back at the facts. NATO is the defender of the Western world and its values, and those values are through the UN Charter became values of whole civilized world. So let's see what are those values. Values as peace, freedom, democracy, liberty, rule of law, and individual rights. So importance of these values is great because whenever they were endangered, humanity had really big problems. So that is the reason why we cannot put price on those values and on work to preserve those values. Another value of NATO is the way in which NATO is functioning. So we have large number of states who have same rights in making decisions and in resolving conflicts. That same right is based on consensus, because all the things they are solving is based on consensus and the right of veto. So in every conflict that occurred anywhere in the world, situation wasn't black or white. It was somewhere in the middle. NATO is the defender of that middle situation, which is crucial to resolving of conflicts. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, Bratislava, you go ahead.
My name is Tomáš Čižík. I am the student of master degree in Faculty of Social and Economic Sciences. And in my opinion, NATO is a political and military organization, so its values can be divided into two camps, political and military. Political values is, according to my opinion, democratic. NATO is promoting democratic values, human rights, and rule of law. Also, NATO is cooperating on defense and security issues. For example, NATO is participating in the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 to protect women and child in a conflict. And political and military values, according to my opinion, is collective defense, which is enshrined by Washington Treaty and Article 5. So I think it's all. Thanks.
Thank you for your brevity. Now we go to audience in Belgrade. Audience in Belgrade can ask the question to be answered by Bratislava first. Does the audience in Belgrade want to ask a question about the values of NATO? Do we have a question here in the audience? No, it does not seem so. Bratislava, do you have a question in the audience?
No.
Yes.
We have.
I have one question.
afternoon. I want to ask if you think if the values of NATO will change in foreseeable future. Thank you.
Did you understand the question?
Yes, if
Okay.
the values of NATO.
If the values of NATO will change.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. But we still have a question to Bratislava from Belgrade. Anybody in the audience, second try, wants to ask a question about the values? All right, then I'll ask the question to Bratislava. Which of the values which NATO is based on is most dear to you, to students? Just one of them, and why? Okay, Bratislava, you go ahead answering Mike. Yes. Okay, we have a question over there.
Good afternoon. I was just wondering, did Slovakia had to give up on some its own values in order to become a member of NATO? Thank you.
Wonderful. Bratislava, you can go ahead.
Thank you for your question. Well, I think that what I would like to say is another value is experience that in 1989 we had an experience with the communist regime, but we had also experience with non-democratic or freely democratic regime during the 1990s. So this is our value, this is our experience, which we would like to give to the NATO in their own peace building and state building missions. Thank you.
Wonderful. What about the questions of the values of the NATO for future?
It's a question for us.
Yes, the question for you that was asked by the audience here.
In my opinion, for the future value, it will be human rights, because in today's conflict, about 90% of casualties are civil lives. So, and civil lives in today's world have very high value. So, I think it will be the most proposed value in NATO.
Wonderful, thank you. We now go to the third question.
Which values, if any, Slovakia had to give up?
Aha, yes. Which were the values that Slovakia had to give up during the process of entering NATO?
Well, values during entering to NATO. Wow. How to say that? I was 13 when Slovakia became a member of NATO. Give me a time, I will thinking about it, and then I will answer to you, okay? There will be a deal between you and me.
Okay. The question about the future values of the line.
Yes, I will answer that. Well, we think that NATO could change and would change its values in the future because NATO is evolving, and we had evidence that NATO is evolving when the Eastern Bloc fell down and when the NATO had reconciled its policy, and I think in the future, if we have different problems, NATO is capable to evolve. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to third question, and it will be first answered by Bratislava, then it will be answered by the team in Belgrade. And the question is, what are the security guarantees by NATO? How do you understand these security guarantees which are provided by NATO to its individual members and to the alliance as a whole?
Okay.
Hello to all. My name is David Gašparik. I'm a master student here at Comenius University. So basically, as we heard, the cornerstone of NATO, of the alliance, is the principle of collective defense. And when we go to the threats and challenges, well, the summit in Lisbon, where was the new strategic concept adopted, there were some new threats and challenges. So the modern security is still evolving, as we can see, and the three core tasks for the alliance, or the challenges, as we can call it, are the collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security. The security environment and the threats for the NATO, where nowadays we can assume that the Euro-Atlantic area is at peace, and some threat of conventional attack is low, but there are still some threats, as we can name as was already named, the proliferation of nuclear weapons, the growing proliferation of ballistic missiles, of course the terrorism as a threat to NATO citizens, and also the evolution of the new technology like laser weapons and electronic warfare, which will also have the impact on the NATO military in the future, and also basically some environmental issues which affect the alliance. About the NATO operations which are currently involved, from my point of view, the most important is the ISAF operation in Afghanistan, because I studied the Afghanistan the previous year. I think it will be the area which will most affect the NATO alliance. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bratislava. Now Belgrade, go on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the floor. My name is Angela Cvetkovic. I'm a third-year Faculty of Political Science student. My major is International Studies. Well, how I see this concept is Washington Treaty Article 5 for the beginning, and it's been principle of whole NATO concept in collective defense. If some ally is under attack, every member of alliance consider it like attack to the alliance, and it taking action. It concerned to take actions with the others against that attacker. But however, we need to think about it. It is not guaranteed to assist. Other members are not obliged to assist. I would also talk about missions before 1990, Article 5 missions and non-Article 5 missions. Those non-Article 5 missions are more important because we are having two concepts here. First, peace building, peacekeeping, and peacemaking, which NATO are obliged to do in some conflict issues. Second is crisis management, which is crucially important because if we have crisis, we are not having a peaceful world. Second of all, NATO as an alliance is helping to resolving ethnic and border conflicts within those members, like Turkey and Greece in their conflict around Cyprus. Third thing that our colleagues from Bratislava are telling us is strategic concept from 2010, but it's crucially important that now we have less probability of traditional attacks and traditional weapons. Now we need to focus on the new threats like ballistic missile, nuclear weapons, cyber attacks, extremism, terrorism, trafficking of narcotics, weaponry, and in human beings, which is crucially important to stop if we want to live in a peaceful world. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the audience in Bratislava has the right of the first question about the security guarantees. The audience in Bratislava, you can ask the question.
Okay, thank you. Well, I like this concept.
The audience, not the team, the audience. You are the team.
Yes. So nobody is from the audience to ask a question.
Is there a question?
No.
No question? And a question here in Belgrade? Yes, please.
Okay. Does NATO have any concept of how to deal with cyber wars, which are really popular, I can say, nowadays? Thank you.
Wonderful. The question to Bratislava: NATO and its ability to face off the cyber wars.
So I think the cyber wars and the cyber attacks basically are the new emerging threat, and I think the NATO with its allies, it's nowadays trying to find some ways how to can manage these attacks. Right. More about them?
Well, that's me, as you heard. NATO made a system of centers of excellency, and one of these centers is a center of anti-cyber defense, which is situated in Tallinn, in Estonia. So this is the answer how NATO cope with this threat.
Wonderful. Does Bratislava still wants to use its right to ask a question on this point or not? All right. If not, then we will ask the fourth question, which will be first answered by the team in Belgrade. And the question is, as we heard in the lecture, the defense is associated with the values, with the commitment, but also it has also some budgetary repercussions. The question is NATO connected with prosperity? When you are member of the alliance, does it mean that you are better off? Does it mean that you can invest some of the money which you will otherwise put up for your individual defense, that you can actually invest them into something else? So, is NATO connected with prosperity? And now Team Serbia answers.
Thank you. My name is Stefan Sirijanski. I'm a second-year student at the Faculty of Political Sciences here in International Relations. In essence, NATO presents an organization of the richest countries in the world. It puts together the most powerful countries in the world, and the biggest question here is there a causal link there, or is it just a correlation? I don't think it can be answered very simply, because those nations are, besides being NATO members, also members of other international organizations such as the World Trade Organization or the EU, as most of them are. But I do think that for poorer countries like the Balkan countries, it can be much more easily answered. If you, for example, take Serbia or Bosnia or Macedonia, there are two main attributes you can put to those countries. One is that they're a Balkan country. The second, that they're a post-communist one. What does that mean? If they're a Balkan country, then they have ethnical conflicts usually. They are multi-ethnic societies. If you say they're post-communist, they have still weak institutions. If you're an investor, if you want to invest in one of those countries, you're not likely to do so. You see these as problems. I think that NATO presents a clear signal to investors that those countries are willing to adhere to the principles and rules of the free market, that they're willing to provide you with stable area in which to invest. They're not likely to nationalize your property, and that generally you can prosper from it. We see this happened in Hungary after it joined NATO. Foreign investments in Hungary doubled, as well as especially direct foreign investments and greenfield investments. Moreover, there's a lot of positive externalities to joining NATO. Countries have to invest money in infrastructure, in roads, in ports, in airports, and this helps the general well-being of a country. It's what economists call positive externalities. They can be used for many other things. Also, the military-industrial complex benefits greatly from producing a bigger amount of goods for a bigger market, and there is a bigger demand for the products that your military-industrial complex can produce. And lastly, as Albania has pointed out, after joining NATO, its tourism has grown. So there is a lot of connection between prosperity and NATO membership.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bratislava, you can go ahead.
Okay. I will be very brief about this because I think it was pretty much of it was answered. So, is NATO connected with prosperity? I think it's not a cheap solution like was previously mentioned, because you have to develop your own capabilities and so on and so forth. But as my colleague Serbia mentioned, it's also connected with building of infrastructure, which to me poses a significant signal to the prosperity. And I will also argue that it's better for the country to be the part of the NATO, because to my opinion, building the own military capabilities, it's a much higher economic for the country itself. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we can have a question from the audiences, the audience in Bratislava and the audience in Belgrade. Is there anybody in Bratislava who wants to ask a question about connection between NATO and prosperity? Anybody in the audience?
Yes, we have one student.
Wonderful. Anybody here in Belgrade? Super.
Hello. Sorry, my question is not really related to the NATO prosperity or something, but it's more about your attitude towards Middle East. And do you think it's right that NATO is interfering in the things that are going on there?
Did you understand the question? Would you kindly repeat the question, because we had too much noise over the line? Thank you. Maybe come closer to the microphone or something. Thank you.
My question is about your attitude towards Middle East, and do you think it's right that NATO intervenes into those countries and influences the things which are going there?
Terrorism.
Attitude to Middle East countries.
Okay. Attitude of NATO? Do we understand your question right? Was it the question about the attitude of NATO towards the Middle East and the terrorism?
Okay. Can be.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's not a black and white question. But if you ask me for my personal opinion, I do believe there is, if a state is a sponsor of terrorism or it cannot establish the rule of law and stop terrorist organizations, then I do believe there is a responsibility to protect both the citizens of that country from different terrorist groups which function in them, but also the citizens of the rest of the world from the possibility of terrorism, because terrorism is never tied to national borders. It is transnational, and if it is a danger to global security, then it is clear that an intervention must be done.
Wonderful. The question from the audience here.
We spoke about the prosperity and what kind of prosperity NATO might bring. This is also related to the question of enlargement. Both of the themes express the idea that the NATO membership might bring prosperity. My question would be, from the Slovak point of view and from the alliance point of view, do you find further enlargement of the alliance as a positive thing, or rather a negative? Can we say that the bigger alliance gets, the better it is for the alliance? Or we can say that, okay, the more countries we have to protect, the harder it is for us, and the less positive it is for the actual members today. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bratislava.
So I think the answer is pretty simple. I think the more members from my point of view, brings the more secure environment, and from my point of view, I am not against any other the NATO enlargement. I think it will only benefit the global security. Thank you.
That was brief. Thank you. Now we go to the fifth question, which has a certain bearing on the previous one, and that is NATO costly, or is NATO too costly? When you have to secure the defense capabilities on your own versus securing defense capabilities in a collective alliance. People say, oh, you have to have a big amount of financing, and you have to be big spenders in order to qualify to be a member of the alliance. But is it really true? Is NATO too costly? And now, of course, the floor is Bratislava's first to answer the question, and then Belgrade follows with answering the question. Bratislava, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, my name is Peter Novak, and as my colleague, I am a student of Comenius University. And to your question, is NATO too costly? Simply answer no. Because we cannot manage what is the price of security, and then we cannot say or ask what is the price of human life. However, I would like to speak about the situation in the NATO member states. Since 2008, the most of NATO member states are in a financial crisis, which led to the financial austerity, and this situation led to the budget cuts and loss of many military capabilities. I think that this situation leads to the new way and new framework of cooperation between NATO member states. As I said in my question to Mr. Bator, NATO stronger supported smart defense project, share and pooling capabilities, and other projects to save more money and to have a safe amount of capabilities. This led to the moment when, for example, Slovak engineers are one of the best military engineers in IOD missions, and also when we supported engineering capabilities, we also supported their ability to make their mission on own territory, for example, during the national natural catastrophes. And my conclusion is that every crisis can learn us something new. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now Belgrade can answer the question.
Hello, my name is Selena Torlakovic. I'm the student at the Faculty of Political Sciences at the Master Program of International Relations. And I would like to answer this question from of course, there cannot be a clear answer because you're simply comparing both economic costs and benefits and the values as costs and benefits. And preceding it from the aspects of values, of course you would say that there is no price in keeping lives and keeping democratic values, but on economic aspects, there are different opinions on whether NATO is too costly. First of all, we already have answered some of the issues with prosperity, and they're connected to the infrastructure, to the country's investments in the infrastructure and the capacity building. And that can be the costliest aspect of integration. But as we have heard from the lecture, we do base most of these investments on actually the investments of other NATO countries, on helps, on projects that are financed. So this is the kind of a way where you can balance these economic costs. Probably the most costly aspects of NATO integration would be specialization and standardization of the entire military system,
and the defense system. But most of these processes have already been answered, even in the countries that are to be joined into NATO, such as Serbia. On the other hand, we have seen that many costs come from the obligations to import some of the military equipment or I don't know, military forces that you need in your country. And this was probably the biggest cost of one of the newest NATO members, and this is Croatia, and the country of the region that did have some economic difficulties due to the NATO. But we will definitely say that the NATO would bring many economic benefits, and therefore probably the benefits outweigh the costs in this sense. But this is yet to be answered by every individual member country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the audience in Bratislava can ask the first question, and then the audience in Belgrade. Is NATO too costly? Anybody in Bratislava who wants to ask a question for the team in Belgrade?
There's no question.
There's no question? How about here in Belgrade? We have a question here.
Well, you have mentioned that the most of EU members are also in the NATO. So there is a question when we talk about Serbia approaching EU. We know that that is not obligation for a country to become a member of EU to become a member of NATO. But I have just discussed that Slovakia has become the member of NATO and EU in the same year. So is the view of the citizens of Slovakia as common people that that was a necessary step before entering the EU? Because that is one of the major questions in our political scene now. Thank you.
You mean to be a member of EU and NATO in the same time, or what?
Or is that necessary? You know, de facto, that you have to be NATO member before you become EU member?
Well, I don't think.
That is wonderful, and they say that brevity is the mother of wisdom, but this was extremely wisdomly. Would you elaborate on that a little bit more? We would be very thankful for that.
Yes, of course. Well, for example, Austria, which is a neighborhood country for Slovakia, is a member of EU, but Austria is not a member of NATO. I don't see no problem in this. And in regard to military and security questions, European Union has also own military structure under the common foreign and security policy. So, and as colleague in Belgrade said, what is the perception of Slovak citizens? Well, Slovak citizens perceived Slovak armed forces through the missions, for example, ISAF or missions on Balkan, and we labeled this mission as a NATO mission, not as a EU mission. So that's my answer. I hope it was clear.
Wonderful. There was no question from Bratislava on this, but I would pose the same question to the team in Belgrade. Do you believe that it is necessary to become first a member of the North Atlantic Alliance to be able to enter the European Union? Or are the values of North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union interconnected? Team Belgrade wants to answer the question.
Well, of course, there is no official obligation for any country to become a member of NATO before becoming a member of EU. And of course, it's on every individual country to decide whether they want to become a member of NATO. But considering the fact that you have to complete some obligations, like develop your system, develop the democratic values in your country, to make your country how to say, preferable in their organization, you need to fulfill some of the same steps in order to become a member of either countries. Of course, NATO puts greater accent on the military, on defense strategies, on defense capabilities, but also on democratic values and democratic capabilities. So these democratic capabilities consider the same steps. So it would make definitely more easier for you to become an EU member if you have already completed some of the steps in order to become a NATO member.
Thank you very much. And now we come to our last question, which will be first answered by the team Serbia and then by team Slovakia. The question is, what is the relationship between NATO and Serbia? Team Serbia, who wants to answer the question? Go ahead. It won't go any longer.
The relationship between NATO and Serbia is quite complex, both in practice and in the public sphere, in the public opinion towards NATO. Less than 20% of the Serbian population support NATO membership. However, over 70% of the personnel in the armed forces do support NATO membership, and the percentage of support is even higher among the top-ranking officers, so it's not that clear. On the other hand, regarding the official stance, Serbia is a member of the Partnership for Peace, but on the other hand, our National Assembly has declared in 2007 that Serbia is militarily neutral. So Serbia has no plans to join NATO in the future. There is cooperation in different fields. The members of our armed forces have participated in different NATO exercises and missions, but officially there is no consensus, and it doesn't look that way that Serbia will join NATO at any time in the foreseeable future. In essence, that's pretty much it for now.
That was also quite brief. Now, Bratislava, what do you think about the relationship between NATO and Serbia?
Thank you for this question. I think it is very hot and hard question also for Slovaks and for Serbians. Well, firstly, I think that we should look to the future, not to the history, and we should find things which are common for us, not questions which divide us. As our colleague said, Serbia is a member of Partnership for Peace since 2006, and this leads to the moment when in our globalized world we have a common perception of threats which are common from Slovaks, for Americans, and also for Serbians. I think that in the current situation, NATO is not about territorial defense, and it's about not the spreading of democracy, but the spreading of stability. And well, this question is directly connected with the Serbian future membership of EU. That, as I said in my previous statement, European Union have own military structure and a common foreign and security policy. So I think that, as our colleague said, the relationship between NATO and Serbia is quite complex. That's my opinion to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the floor for the questions from the audiences, the audience in Belgrade and then the audience in Bratislava. First, the audience in Belgrade.
Does the fact that Serbia is a self-proclaimed neutral country and the fact that we are a part of PFE program of NATO stops NATO from taking any military actions against us? Thank you.
Well, military actions against Serbia in current situation, it's a very hot question. I don't want to say just no, but I say no. I think that in future it is not a possibility to start a military conflict between Serbia and NATO, as I understand your question.
All right. Satisfied with the response? Wonderful. A question from the audience in Bratislava. Relationship between the alliance and Serbia.
Thank you for the floor. My name is Pavel and I'm a student of European Studies. And as you may know, Slovakia and with its partners from Visegrad Group is building a new strategic defense policy called DAO4. It's an ambitious project. Are there any countries among the Balkan region that are willing to cooperate with Serbia, and how can you imagine the further participation on the building peace in the region? Thank you.
All right. The question was about if don't go far, please. Not yet. We just want to make sure that we got your question right. The question was: is Serbia interested in regional cooperation with other countries of the region? That was the question.
That's right. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you for the question. We, as Serbia, are really open to cooperate with all of our neighborhood because we think that is really important for our economy, for our relationship with our neighborhood, to cooperate to be more powerful countries and to develop ourselves in a way that we have peaceful situation here in the region and peaceful situation generally in Europe, to prosper on a different levels within the military, if you want, economy, education, and generally to have this flow of trades and people among the region. Certainly, like in the European Union, we are getting into eventually. Thank you.
Okay, we are through with the questions. I'd like to give the audiences one more opportunity to ask any question on the topic of NATO. If they so desire, the first chance to ask the question would go to Bratislava, and then we will come back to a question if there is a question here in Belgrade. Do you have an additional question for the team in Belgrade? Okay.
We have.
In the case of Serbia entering the European Union, could Serbian minorities become a possible national threat to the states already in the Union?
Hold on for a second. Could you kindly repeat the question?
Sure. We have a big spread of Serbian Albanian minorities in Germany and Switzerland. In the case of Serbia joining the EU, could this big minority in the country spread more and eventually become a national threat to other countries?
Okay. Are we ready? Who wants to answer? You want? Who wants? I'm not.
It is. Okay. It is true that Serbia has a significant diaspora, but we don't think that it would that necessarily all the people would exit from the country in case of joining the EU. If I may remind you, Serbia is a member of, is on the white Schengen list, so Serbian citizens can enter the EU already without visas. And while it had led to, let's say, bigger amount of immigrants, it has not become a significant security threat to any of the EU countries. The very fact that citizens can exit out of the country easier right now and will be able to exit even more easier once Serbia joins the European Union does not mean that that will become a big security threat. And moreover, generally, in in the event when Serbia does become an EU member, the presumption is that the level of economic prosperity would be at a higher standard, which would also demotivate anyone from leaving the country in significant numbers.
Wonderful. And now the question for the audience in Belgrade. Do we have a question? No, we don't. Well, we have exhausted the list of the questions. I'm sure that there are more, and we will continue with these debates in the fall. In the fall semester, we will again meet. The team of the students from Comenius University will meet the team of the students from University of Novi Sad, and the team from Belgrade University will meet the students from Matej Bel University in Banska Bystrica. With that, I'd like to thank the teams for preparing for today's debate, for their performance. I think they deserve a round of applause, but we can save it for a couple of minutes until I finish my remarks. Second, I'd like to thank the students in the audiences for coming to join us, for supporting their teams, and of course for being active in asking the questions. Third, I'd like to thank very much the tutors of the students, Zuzana Hozlarova in Bratislava and Filip Bejduš here. And I'd like to thank the leadership of the faculties both in Bratislava and Belgrade in supporting this debate and allowing us to go on. Of course, I'd like to thank my colleagues, Lucia Klapachova and Peter Bator from our permanent mission for coming to join us today. And last but not the least, this event has been made possible with support from the National Endowment for Democracy. We thank them for their support, and we are also grateful for the technical support which has been provided by two Slovak companies, Logical and Gosu, for this intermission. Just two more technical remarks. One, for the team in Bratislava, please make a picture with your tutor, so we'd like to have it for the album. And second, there will be refreshments both here in Bratislava and here in Belgrade. And of course, we'd like to thank at the end our local partner, our Belgrade partner CAS, for doing this project with us here in Belgrade and in Novi Sad. And we say hello to Bratislava and see you in the fall. Thank you very much.